All right, today we are taking a trip way back in time, long before refrigerators, before freezers, before any of that. We're going to unpack this brilliant and maybe a little eccentric guide from 1821 on how to build the absolute perfect ice house. Let's just dive right in. So think about it for a second. It's a pretty simple question, but the answer is anything but. Imagine you've just harvested these massive blocks of ice from a frozen lake in the middle of January. Now, how in the world do you make sure you still have that ice for a nice cold drink in the blistering heat of August? I mean, this was a huge engineering challenge back then, and our author has a very strong opinion on how to solve it.
So, before we get to our author's kind of revolutionary design, let's take a look at what everybody else was doing. What was the standard way to store ice back in 1821?
Well, the logic seemed pretty straightforward. Heat melts ice, so the best way to protect it? Bury it. Dig a deep pit in the cool earth, probably under some big shady trees to keep the sun off. It makes sense, right? Keep it cool, keep it dark, and your ice should be fine. And this is where our story gets really interesting. The author of our source material, a text called Cottage Economy, he looked at this common practice and basically said, nope, you're all doing it wrong. He argued that everyone was fighting the wrong enemy. So, if it's not just about the heat, what is it? Our author puts forward this theory that just completely reframes the whole problem. And really, this one core idea is what his entire design is built on. And here it is. While everyone else was totally focused on fighting heat, our author insisted that the real destroyer of ice was moisture. He actually says, the heat is to be kept away certainly, but moisture is the great enemy of ice. Shifting the focus from heat to dampness, well, that's a total game changer. This one line is everything. It's his whole argument. He believed that even a little bit of dampness would make ice melt way faster than just warm air would. So the key takeaway here is that the perfect ice house isn't just a cold one, it has to be perfectly, absolutely dry. And when you start thinking about moisture, that old method of digging a pit suddenly looks really, really flawed. I mean, the author argues that the ground is just naturally damp, and no amount of cement or fancy walls can stop that moisture from seeping in. And even worse, any ice that does melt has nowhere to go. It just sits there, creating this wet environment that makes the rest of the ice melt even faster. Okay, so if building underground is the wrong move, what's the right one? Well, his solution was an above-ground ice house, built almost entirely out of wood and straw, designed with one single goal: defeat the damp. His whole design boils down to 4 key principles, and pretty much every single one of them flies in the face of what everyone else was doing. He wants it out in the open, raised up off the ground, and wrapped in this massive shell of straw. Let's break down each piece. Okay, this is so counterintuitive. Instead of hiding the ice house in the shade, he says to build it right out in the open sun and wind. Why? Because sun and wind are nature's dryers. His number one priority isn't hiding from the heat. It's making sure the building itself stays bone dry all the time. So how do you deal with all that extra heat from being out in the sun? With extreme insulation. And I mean extreme. We are talking about a wall of packed straw that is 4 feet thick. A massive barrier to keep the warm air from ever getting close to the ice. And that 4-foot thickness isn't just for the walls. Oh no, he applies the exact same logic to the roof, calling for a thatched layer of straw that's another 4 feet deep. So you've got this complete super insulated cocoon. And the material is key. Straw is a fantastic insulator that, unlike earth or stone, doesn't hold or transfer that dreaded enemy, moisture. Now, this might be the most ingenious part of the whole design, the ice bed. See, since any meltwater is a threat, you can't just plop the ice on the floor. So he designs this elevated, porous platform that lets any water drain away the very instant it melts. It keeps the whole ice pile dry from the bottom up. And the level of detail here is just incredible. It's not just a platform, it's a carefully engineered filter. It starts with these huge logs at the bottom, then layers of smaller and smaller poles and rods, and it ends with a fine mesh of twigs on the very top. The whole thing creates this 17-inch high bed that holds the ice up, but lets water just vanish right through the gaps. So here we are. We have this incredibly detailed, logical, revolutionary design for the perfect ice house. The theory seems solid, the plans are meticulous. It must have worked like a charm, right? This is the moment of truth. After laying out this absolutely flawless-sounding plan, did the author's straw house become the new gold standard for keeping ice frozen all across the country? And there it is. In maybe one of the most honest moments you will ever find in a 19th century guide, the author just comes right out and says it. After all those pages of detailed instructions, he's never actually built one himself. Yeah, he explains that the entire design was actually given to him by a gentleman whose judgment he just trusted completely. So this whole thing, this perfect plan, it's all an exercise in theory. It's this remarkable piece of engineering on paper, passed from one friend to another, and now to us. And he ends with this fantastic, self-aware little joke, he says, with a bit of a wink, that even if the design is a total failure for storing ice, the massive, dry, straw-filled building would make an absolutely first-rate bed for pigs. You just have to love the pragmatism there.
It really leaves you wondering, doesn't it? Here was this brilliant idea, perfectly reasoned, incredibly detailed, and yet it may never have even been built. It makes you think, how many other game-changing inventions or perfect plans from history are just sitting in a book somewhere waiting for someone to actually test them out?